Hello. My guest is joining me in just a moment, but I didn't want to be late with my broadcast. Screen is freezing. Oh, man. Technology. Hmm. All right. So, how's that, Jesse? Is it starting to get a little better now? I got nothing. You know what? I'll close down some browser windows. Maybe that's. Oh, you know what? I'll close Zoom. Maybe it's using some of my bandwidth. Quit that. Yeah, my guest is still coming, Jesse. But I wanted to start before Facebook kicked me out, and then I had to go re-enter with that. All right. So Scott should be along right away here. Scott Sweetman is my guest for today. So let's get started. Okay. Welcome to 1000 Ways, the show where we consider the 1000 ways to kiss the earth, of which Rumi spoke so many years ago. Further to that, we're going to use that as also a way to research and discuss ways to reduce adverse childhood experiences, or if you look at it the other way, enhance childhood experiences. That is the purpose of today's visit. And Scott, we actually had a little interview with Scott previously, and the audio cratered. So we were unable to hear it. So we're trying that again here. And it looks like everything is freezing. Oh, damn it. Well, maybe we're back. We're live. Okay, good. Is the screen still, is it playing properly now, Jesse? All right. We are just waiting for Scott A. Sweetman to join us, and we will get going. So, Scott, when you come on here, then let's get things happening. And in the meantime, maybe I'll do this right now while we're waiting. I had a beautiful conversation with my friend Bill. And after we ended the conversation, there was a song that I should have shared with him that was perfect for the discussion we were having. So the song it goes like this. How many times have you heard someone say, if I had his money, I would do things my way. But little they know that it's so hard to find one rich man in 10 with a satisfied mind. Once I was waiting in fortune and fame, everything that I dreamed of to get a start in life's game. Then suddenly it happened. I lost every dime, but I'm richer by far with a satisfied mind. Money can't buy back your youth when you're old, or a friend when you're lonely, or a love that's grown cold. The wealthiest person is a pauper at times compared to the man with a satisfied mind. When my life is over and my days have run out, my friends and my loved ones I'll leave, there's no doubt. But one thing's for certain, when it comes my time, I'll leave this world with a satisfied mind. Yes, one thing's for certain, when it comes my time, I'll leave this world with a satisfied mind. All righty. Oh, Mr. Sweetman, where are you, my buddy? I'm not seeing an email. I'm sorry, you said we would connect like we did last night. Which one are you? Okay, all right, that's fine. Do, 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 do. All right. Well, Scott Sweetman, I think you're probably watching. So check your Facebook Messenger. You should have a link there. I have sent to your email. It should be there. I'm not sure when. So keep looking for it and you'll find it. In the meantime, I'm going to sing another song. Let's do that. How about, what would be a good song to sing? How about a little Proud Mary? That should be fun, right? Oh, use my headphones. Rolling, rolling, rolling on the river. Rolling, rolling, rolling on the river. Listen to the story now. Left a good job in the city, working for the man every night and day. And I never lost 1 minute of sleeping, worrying about the way things might have been. Big wheels keep on turning, Proud Mary keep on burning. Rolling, rolling, rolling on the river. If you come down to the river, Lord, you're gonna find some people who live. You don't have to worry if you had no money. People on the river are happy to give. Big whale keep on turning, Proud Mary keep on burning. Rolling, rolling, rolling on the river. Rolling, rolling, rolling on the river. Cleaned a lot of plates in Memphis, pump a lot of paint down in New Orleans. But I never saw the good side of a city till I hitched a ride on a riverboat queen. Big wheels keep on turning, Proud Mary keep on burning. Rolling, rolling, rolling on the river. Rolling, rolling, rolling on the river. How about this song? It was popular on ATB television commercials a few years ago. Do you hear the sound in the trembling ground, in the air? The wait so long, for the sole keepsake of an old heartache is a whisper, an echo, a song. I find my way back home by the birds and bones, by the westbound sun, to a place I'm known. The streets will remember, even if I don't. I'll find my way back home. Now a thorn finds place in a torn shoelace, as green entwines the night, and the hymnal freights resonate. Lead me on by sweet starlight. I find my way back home by the words and moans, by a promise made on a promise owed, as gravity pulls from a moonlit road. I find my way back home. I find my way back home. All right, let's go back and look for Mr. Sweetman. Is he on here? Hallelujah.
Hi, Al. How are you?
Scott Sweetman has joined us. Scott Sweetman is in the building. All right, good news, man.
Oh, it's trying to notify my emergency contacts for some reason.
Oh, I see.
Can you see this?
No.
I can't shut it off. I don't know what's going on.
I don't know. All right.
It's been a night of technology, my friend.
Exactly. But we're both here at the same time now. So that was the little musical interlude to 1,000 Ways. It's a new thing we just started tonight. And Scott A. Sweetman is my guest. Scott and I had a amazing talk about a month ago, right, Scott? It was life changing.
Exactly.
It was brilliant, but unfortunately, the audio was not good. So nobody
The greatest
will.
interview that doesn't exist.
Exactly. So we're going to give this another go. I hope it's close to as brilliant as we were last time. What do you think, Scott? I'm hoping, buddy.
I hope so. I'm still trying to clear the emergency on my phone because it's notifying everyone in my emergency list that I'm having some kind of an emergency here.
You know what? I'll tell you what. You do that. I'm going to sing a song while you get that shit figured out. How's that?
Okay, it'll take me a minute here. I just have to notify them. I don't want an ambulance showing up at my house.
No, we do not want that. We do not want that.
I got it, I think.
All right. Well, while you're trying to get it, you're going to hear a little bit of Rock Island Line.
Excellent.
Now, this is the story of the Rock Island Line. The Rock Island Line, she runs down into New Orleans. There's a big toll gate down there. And, you know, if you got certain things on board, well, you don't got to pay the man no toll. Well, the train driver, he pulled up to the toll gate. The man asked him what he had on board. He said, I got livestock, I got livestock, I got pigs, I got cows, I got sheep, I got mules, I got all livestock. Well, he said, you're all right, boy. You don't have to pay no toll. You just go right on through. So he went on through the toll gate. And as he went through, he started picking up a little bit of steam, picking up a little bit of speed. He got on through. He turned back and looked at the man. He said, I fooled you. I fooled you. I got pig iron. I got pig iron. I got on pig iron. Well, the Rock Island Line, she's a mighty good road. Rock Island Line, she's a road to ride. Rock Island Line is a mighty good road. If you're going to ride it, got to ride it till you finally get your ticket at the station for the Rock Island Line. Cloudy in the rest and look like rain. Round the corner came a passenger train. Northbound train on a southbound track. We're all going to leave them, but we won't be back. Well, the Rock Island Line, she's a mighty good road. Rock Island Line is a road to ride. Rock Island Line is a mighty good road. If you're going to ride it, got to ride it like you finally get your ticket at the station for the Rock Island Line. Now, I may be right or maybe wrong, but you're going to miss me when I'm gone. Well, the engineer said before he died, there were 2 more drinks that he'd like to try. The doctor said, what could they be? A hot cup of coffee and a cold glass of tea. Well, the Rock Island Line, she's a mighty good road. Rock Island Line, she's a road to ride. Rock Island Line is a mighty good road. If you're going to ride it, got to ride like you finally get your ticket at the station for the Rock Island Line.
Good job. Nice.
Have you got the alert stopped? Are we safe from catastrophe?
Paramedics, yeah.
Okay.
I hope so. Technology. Wow.
We've called off the EMS. We're both safe in our homes. Okay. So let us have a nice chat. For those of you who don't know Scott Sweetman, he is a very, very good communicator, and he thinks well, and he's very community oriented, making this community a better place. He's very smart about social media and getting messaging right so people understand it and feel what would you call it? Encouraged by the messaging. You're a very positive writing style to your work, Mr.
Coming
Sweetman.
from you, Al, that's an amazing compliment. Thanks.
Oh,
buddy.
well, thank you so much.
You're the master.
Now, I can tell you as well, Scott and his family had a school in Japan. And it was very cool because they made the curriculum for what the students need when they went back to their home country, which was quite a unique offering, right?
It was the only school that did that, actually. And it came about when we had our own children. And as Canadians living in Japan, in Nagoya specifically, we ran into other foreign nationals and people that knew that they were going to be moving to another country. And at times, these were Japanese families that knew that they were going to be relocated. If they were working for Toyota, for example, their family might be relocated to the U.S. Traditionally, the wife and children would be left behind because usually the men are the ones that are sent to travel. But as all countries are changing, a lot of executives really want to be with their family. They had kids to be with them, just like everywhere else in the world. So they wanted to take their kids with them when they were being transferred. So they wanted to fit into the school system there. And so Fleur, who's an expert on curriculum development, that was one of her focuses in her undergraduate and master degree, came up with a program where we taught individualized programs to each child, which in our system here, we do have individual education plans for children, but not for every child. in every situation with their own specified goals for the outcomes they need to achieve where they're headed next.
Whoa, wait a minute. Let me just clarify this. So we had whatever, Ling from China, who was one of your students. So you would have, and Ling is in grade 7, let's pretend. So then you would have a curriculum specifically for Ling that when she went back, then she would just kind of seamlessly get back into her studies in China.
That's right. And so we would work with the parents, we would work with the embassies, we would work with, obviously we don't speak Chinese. We had a great family come from Holland, and the older boy was going to take a test to decide whether he could go to university or whether he could go to trade school. And we couldn't handle his language requirement in-house. We had a French teacher, an English teacher, Japanese teacher, taught Spanish as an extra. But we worked with the family, and the dad was a professor, and he felt confident teaching the language. So our curriculum included the goals that he needed for his language development, which were taught by his father and checked with the school. We handled math, social studies, etc. for his curriculum. So we were very successful with people who knew that they were going to be moving to another country or another area where the curriculum was very different. And so the children were prepared for that next transition because we saw a lot of families when you're moving with a family, and I think this ties in with what you're working on achieving now in your life and with this program, is children have a lot of stress, period. We always think that, children are so carefree, they don't have mortgages, they don't have all these things. But as you know, children have a tremendous amount of pressure from the world around them, from growing their own bodies, etc. So we really felt that when children went to a new culture where new language and new norms, and even our own kids, which were born in Japan, and when they come back to Canada, everyone just assumes they were born here. But they went through stress of they didn't know things that other kids knew, things they took for granted in Japan didn't hold true here, et cetera, et cetera. So education was one area that we really felt that we could help in. And by getting those children ready for their new environment and their new school system and the challenges there. And it was really successful, and we were proud of it, definitely.
Cool. And that took a lot of coordination to get something so specific, curriculum just for each child, kind of a thing. Yeah, that's quite interesting.
Yeah. We had people from Russia, China, Korea, the US, Canada, Holland. I'm missing so many different countries, Africa, different countries in Africa, really all over the world. There wasn't anyone that we didn't have time, Central America, South America. Toyota employs people from all over or brings in consultants from all over the world. Nagoya is the head office of the founding area of Toyota Corporation. So we had a lot of foreign influence. And there were American schools there. One of the biggest school in Nagoya is an American school, and they taught specifically the American curriculum, which is great, no question there. But if you're a Canadian, you miss out on the Canadian components, geography, history, etc. So that's what the program was designed for.
Yeah. Oh, very cool. Very cool. What an amazing experience, and what value you provided for those expats, right? That they could go know that their kids were in a great learning environment specific to what they need to learn and their cultural expectations, right? I mean, that's where the curriculum comes from, is what I get. The Department of Education says our citizens need to know this stuff, right? That's kind of how it works, right?
Well, and it wasn't just for our families. It was for our community. Our family was in the same boat. We were a Canadian family. We love Japan. Absolutely. It's our second home. But, we knew that the girls would probably want to go to Canada or to England. Fleur's also a British citizen. We went to school in England, university there as well. So we knew that in the future, they probably wouldn't want to spend their whole lives in Japan. If they did, that was great. But we wanted to make sure they had the tools if they needed them to go someplace else or to re-enter Canadian society. And as it turned out, there was a big disaster, the big Fukushima meltdown, and we were forced to return much earlier than we planned. And it was good that they were prepared for that.
No kidding. Yeah. When we were talking about like how hard it could be to be a child, the other side of that, parenting's not easy either. Like, parenting, I don't think anybody gets it perfect. I just don't think that exists.
No.
But I think that it's a challenging task. And especially for our families right now in these COVID times, man, parenting gets a whole bunch more challenging, right? So.
we went through, and it's interesting you say that, just backing up a little, when we decided to have children, and of course, we started to prepare, started to read all the books, and then we found out we had twins, and that was about 3 seconds of horror, and then a lifetime of utter joy that we had.
Yeah.
And the first book we read on multiples, it said, a crazy ratio of children are abused by their parents, and the occurrence of physical abuse by parents to multiples is exponentially higher. So
Really?
people with twins, people with triplets, quadruplets, etc., the stress, as you said exactly, on the parents goes up.
Oh, okay.
According to multiples. And so that was something that we were, of course, no one sets out to, physically harm their children, but it was something that we were always very aware of, that because we were dealing with multiples, or, people dealing with more than one child, often are under more stress than they might be if they only have one. That having been said, having an only child brings about a whole bunch of stress and things right now, because children can't visit. Right? Like if you have a child, how do you get them to, opportunities to socialize and to engage with other people, and exposure to different ideas and stimulus that they might not have here?
Yeah, it's a huge challenge, a huge deficit that we're operating under, where we can't have the connectivity that we would normally like to have, right? And even the level of connectivity we had before COVID was probably less than what human beings really thrive under. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like, yeah, where that, I've talked about him a whole bunch, Dr. Bruce Perry, right? But, he keeps talking about the relation richness that we and our children used to enjoy when we're hunter-gatherer type days, right? Where you'd have 40 people, and let's say there's 5 little kids, but there's 10 that are 10 or 15 or 12, 10 or 12 or 15 years old, so they can assist. And then there's aunties and uncles and, brothers, and, so just the 5 or 6 developmentally advanced people per each child, right? So the richness of that relationship and the richness of their engagement, way different than we had even before COVID, right? Now COVID makes that even worse, right? So that's his big thing, is that restoring some of that more and richer relationships would be very helpful for kids that have toxic trauma in their life, trauma beyond what they can bear, right? Which that varies by person, of course, but anything will fail if it gets enough abuse on it, right? That's the reality. Anything or any person will fail if you keep heaping it on, right? So.
Well, and I think your example is important in realizing that cuts both ways, right? So growing up, I grew up on a farm, up by Bentley, Alberta. We were we raised horses, and we had mixed farming, and our doors were always open. We had cousins and aunts and uncles and neighbors going. I just grew up assuming that anyone that walked in the door was friend.
Sure. Yeah.
I didn't have a sense of somebody who walked in our house was ever foe, ever.
Right.
So those people, you trusted them, and if they said, "Oh, we're going here, we're going there," you just jumped in the truck and you went with them, and there was really that sense of community. Unfortunately, when we moved to Japan and when we opened our schools and started to have to hire teachers, of course we had to start doing background checks, and making sure that you weren't exposing children to people that would put them at risk. And we found, unfortunately, a lot of people had come from other countries to Asia, not particularly Japan, but other countries, as sex offenders, to be honest. And that's why they had gone to these other countries. They were either fleeing authorities, or the registration of sex offenders, or the enforcement of laws related to those things weren't as enforced. And so we really found that we wanted to have an open classroom, but we had to be really careful about who we let in. And we wanted to let the parents in, because we wanted to exactly have that community you were talking about. And, parents are a great source of sharing cultural and family, and the pride children get when their parents come in and help out in the classroom and share their stories. And all of those things are really important, but that's weighed on the fact that you know, what does an offender look like? What does an abuser look like? You know, I go back to the book on multiples. It didn't say if this condition is met and if this condition is met and if this condition is met, you might, you know, get mad and hit your children. It said you are more likely, whoever you are,
Right.
multiples, to act out in anger at your children.
Hmm.
Right. So,
and just because of the special, like just because of the doubling up of the normal care for a child kind of a thing, where they're both at the same age, just that extra stress, extra pressure kind of a thing, maybe extra financial pressure for that matter, right?
yeah,
That's enough just to make it, maybe push somebody over the edge if they were couldn't handle what they were dealing with. So,
and I think that's really, I've been thinking about that a lot with COVID, and how, you know, parents are very much in today's society used to, quite honestly, not spending all day with their children past a certain point. Where, you know, in other countries and in the school system, we were used to spending all day with our children, and that was just the way it was. In some countries, you know, on the farm, I used to ride in the tractor from the time I was a baby. They put a sling behind the tractor seat and the window, and I grew still the sound of a tractor, and I'm go right to sleep. But you know, and I worry about parents that are in that situation now. And you know, I was looking up some stats before I came on tonight. And they were talking about developmental issues. They were talking about all the things, of course, that can complicate any child development. And then how, if you're isolated and you can't go to someone and talk to them about what you can do, or how to cope with this even. And we saw that in people who came from countries where they have really strong family ties. And one of the things, for example, and I'm using this culture as an example because it's one that we shared in a lot and participated in ourselves. And families coming from India, they often had issues that at home, they had a whole crew of aunties and that would help them. You know, what to feed them, what if there was a problem, they could go talk to the aunties and just let the stress out and work through it. But of course, when they, you know, moved to a different society, a different culture, a different country, all of those ties were broken.
Right.
And they didn't know who to go to or who to trust or who to talk to or even who's interested in them. And so that's why I think, you know, like you're doing, and I hope I'm not breaking confidences, but I think your activity in Big Brothers is really good in that you're providing opportunities for somebody to have an outside experience, a chance to experience someone else's life. And I think that's really important. And I know when I've done it, it's been beneficial for me as much as them.
Hey, speaking of that, I have a plan with the young man that I'm working with. He's very much like I was when I was his age. He loves to have a steering wheel and a gear shifter in his hand.
Still today, you're like that.
Still today, I'm like that. And he's just like that. If I can get him a job where he could be in the driver's seat of anything, he would be happy.
Nice.
So here's my plan. He turns 14 next March.
Sweet.
I want to go and find somebody. If you're a viewer and you know somebody that's got like an old truck that's sitting in the back, it's been there for 20 years, and you can part with it for very little money to me, then me and this young gentleman, we're going to work on it. We're going to fix it when he turns 14 to get his learners. That's what he's going to practice with. And then when he gets 16, he's going to have a vehicle that he's worked on and that he knows how to drive well. It'll be great. I got my license on my 16th birthday and I had a car registered on my 16th birthday. So It was like that. And that'd be awesome if we can replicate that experience. So if you know anybody's got an old truck kicking around, needs work, contact me.
Call Alan. That's a great deal.
Yeah.
My first driving experience, I was about 6, and my dad told me to hang onto the wheel of the tractor, and he jumped onto the Stuker on the back.
Oh, yeah.
I took about a quarter mile of fence out, and I wasn't allowed to drive again until I was about 14 and driving my own car. So, yeah. That was my first experience. I learned new words that day too.
I'm sure you did.
My vocabulary increased.
I'm not really sure that was a responsible parenting, saying to my 6-year-old, "Here, you run this powerful piece of equipment. Just hold on to this." Yeah, that's probably wasn't such
probably not. But my mom was milking cows at the time. We had a dairy before we got into horses. when
Yeah.
I was really little. So she was milking cows and looking after the cows, and dad was by himself looking after the fence. And that's what I mean about single parents, right? There was only me at that time. My brother hadn't been born yet. And there was no choice. What did they do with me?
Yeah.
Right. You know,
Yeah. Exactly.
so I just went wherever they went and did whatever they did. And there was probably all kinds of things that should have never been done. I remember having the back of my britches nailed to a roof joist when they were roofing because they didn't want me to fall off, and they didn't have anywhere to put me. So there's a picture of me somewhere with my pants nailed to this roof, and I'm sort of hanging there as a kid. And yeah, that was babysitting when I was young. So
Oh, wow. That's funny. Oh,
yeah,
but your story about running the tractor and hitting the fence and everything,
yeah,
it kind of reminds me of, like, I drove vehicles. My first vehicle that I owned was when I was 12 years old. And
nice.
then I would drive it. We had a little chunk of land. I would drive it in there. And every once in a while, I'd lose control and go into Bub's garden and rip up some vegetables. Then I'd be in big trouble, right? So,
Oh,
but it was a 56 Ford Crown Victoria. So,
oh, nice.
yeah, a pretty fancy car.
Yeah.
And the seats in it were all like, they were all ripped up and everything, right? And I go and I look, and the seat covers match the pattern of the seats, and the seat covers were torn up. The seats were perfect. So I took these seat covers off. It's like brand new upholstery in this car. I was like,
nice.
woo!
Yeah.
Yeah.
I knew an old guy that always put like 3 sets of floor mats on his cars and sort of newspaper under the seats. And then when he went to take them in and trade them in, he would take all that out and the carpet underneath would be new. And he was convinced that because the carpet looked new, he got an extra $500 or $600 on the trade-in.
Oh, is that right? Eh? Yeah. Yeah.
Who knows? But yeah, that's great.
Although he's driving the car around with cardboard, it's probably not the best driving experience. He's kind of all the beauty of this car that somebody crafted. He's just like, yeah, I'm going to cover that shit up so I don't get it dirty, right? That don't make sense. No.
But going back to what you're saying, it's interesting. It would be interesting to sit down with parents that are sort of new parents. I guess you're never sort of a new parent. You're always a new parent. Every year the girls grow older. I think that I'm new at this and I don't know anything about it. And they're adults now. So I should have figured it all out by now because they're doing their own thing. But, how, especially with COVID and everything's going on now, how do parents get those life enriching experiences to their children? And, we all, as you said, we're involved in social media and those things. And I've been watching all the fervor about the province and what they're doing. And, it's not enough, it's too much. And, it's a scandal and, it's the right thing to do. And, as the parents argue about all these things, adults argue about all these really important things, the economy and all of these things. I just wonder about little people and what little people are experiencing in this situation. We went through H1N1 in Japan. We were in Japan when that pandemic hit, and there were deaths in the schools. Unfortunately, one of the students in our school lost a younger brother to H1N1. He was fine in the morning, and he passed away that evening. And that was extremely difficult for our community. It was the first time that I'd ever experienced the death of a child, that I was connected to and had loved and cared about and all of those things. Wow. And often, we see on TV these really horrible pictures of children and they're starving to death. And we all, we hopefully feel bad about those things, but, the context isn't there and all of that. But when it actually happens and people around us, and they were shutting schools, and quite similar to what's happening now, but the healthcare system did become overwhelmed there, as it did in other countries. And so they told us all to stop coming to the hospital, stop getting tested. And if you got COVID, to write it out, or not COVID, sorry, if you got H1N1, write it out in your own home. If there was a death in the family, you were to call the government, let them know, and they would arrange for pickup of the body. But that was it. So I remember us all sitting around at home, our family, looking at each other, and every time anyone coughed or anyone, had a little bit of a temperature, and with kids, as you know, they cough all the time. They have temperatures and runny noses. They're in and out of things, and your heart's sort of in your throat, and you don't really care what all the experts are saying. All you really care about is, please God, let my children survive this.
Yeah.
And you know, I know there has to be people going through that right now. I mean, I pray that my children survive all of this every day. And as I said, they're adults. But I think there's a lot of stress in our communities. I think that a lot of people are dealing with the stress, and this is a new stress, the overabundance of information that we can access that's available to us and is shoved in our face every day presents us with a lot of stress that people in other generations didn't have to deal with. And in many ways, we're fortunate. You know, you and I love taking online classes. We can log in and take classes all over the world and do so, and that's fantastic. It's a great time to be alive. You know, but then we sit here and I'm looking at my daughter's faces when they're watching the evening news, and they're watching all these horrible things happening all over the world, and riots and the pandemic. And I just wonder, you know, is that helping us in a time like this?
I agree. What becomes your sense of hope for the future if that's what you see today, right? Like we're going to get through this, but right now, like I don't watch any of the news at all. And the reason I don't is, one, I know Corolla's going to hit the highlights and she's going to share them with me anyways. But the other thing is that what can you do? Wear face covers, alcohol, sanitize your hands, and try and minimize your contact with other people. And if you're sick, don't leave your house, right? So if you know those basics, and those are the basics that have been in place since March, right? I mean, the parameters change, but the basics are still the same. You know, wear a face cover, wear gloves, or sanitize lots, and that's basically that's the same rules, right? And then of course the distancing, but there's got to, you know, there's some leeway with that. I mean, you and I are doing the totally safe way here today. Hey, one thing I wanted to tell you, Scott, I thought of you the other day for this reason. Through your guidance, let me back up. I was instructing and have instructed children in firearm safety, young people in firearm safety for, I don't know, 30 years or something like that. So I've been doing it for a long time. And my process was pretty simple. I would show up at a time, tell the kids that I was there, they'd show up, and then I'd try and look after them. And if 20 kids came, I was pooch. There's no way I could pull it off. If 2 kids came, it was perfect. But anyway, so I didn't really have any structure. I was just doing it. Scott Sweetman comes along and says, "Oh, Alan, that you're not doing this right, buddy. To do this properly, you know, you have to have a team, and you have to have." So anyways, he created the safe shooting team. He created the STP. He organized these kids and had them all looking sharp, same uniforms, same skills and drills that they got. And these kids have traveled all over the place, and everywhere they go, people say, "Whose kids are those?" Because they're freaking amazing, right? That's what happens.
Well, actually, the way it happened is the kids came to me and said, "Can we do this?" And I said, "Well, only Alan can make this happen." And I came to you and said, "Alan, can we do this?" And you made it happen. But yeah, that's how I saw it. But
all right. Well, I thank you for that. But I kind of got us sidetracked. The point I was trying to make is through that process, I met some lovely young people. Katrina and Sabrina, your daughters being 2, they're amazing young people, and they're awesome. And there's so many others that I have met as well. Like if I start listening, I'm going to miss some of them, right? But really, really good kids are good young adults now.
Yeah.
One thing that I saw the other day from our friend Naomi, which you will recall was a peer with the girls, or is peer with the girls, is she had a post. She works at Save On, if I recall correctly. And she had a post that just says, "Hey, these are tough times. If you don't have groceries for your fridge, PM me, and they'll end up on your porch. I don't want to talk about it. They're just going to end up on your porch." And I thought, wow, what an exceptional, what a beautiful person this young lady's become, right? Or is. She always probably is, but that you notice it now so much more, right? So I thought I would not have met these young people, these responsible, pleasant, polite, people that are willing to work and contribute to a community, these people, if not for Scott Sweetman. So I thank you for that, Scott.
Naomi's a fantastic person, and
she is.
And her family really is. And a lot of that comes from her family values and the things they share. And, you know, she grew up in a very loving and caring home, and she took that and ran with it, you know, and that's fantastic. And I'm as you said, there are so many wonderful kids that have come through the program, and maybe you should explain to people what we're talking about, because people that don't know us or don't know the program probably don't realize we're talking about some of the things that have been demonized on the media and in politics recently. But that group of youth are some of the finest adults that I know today.
I agree.
Are just starting out on their path, and I feel very confident in the future, knowing that they have leadership qualities and they're going to be in the forefront of our society, fighting for what's right and taking care of people like Naomi does and so many others do in the group.
Well,
and then
your girls volunteer all the damn time, right? How many people do we know in our community of firearm users that volunteer so much, that are so responsible people? So what Scott's talking about is basically we provide firearm training for people, and it's the first part is about them being safe, then it's about them being fun, and then if they want to be competitive and use it for that purpose. So it's very, very, for us, it is very clear that a firearm is an excellent tool to teach responsibility. It's also an excellent tool to teach the connection between an action and a consequence. You do this, this is what happens. And with firearms, it happens in milliseconds, right? So that's a great starting off point to have a bigger conversation that this is like life, right? You take an action, it's going to have a consequence. Now that consequence in life might be next week or next month or 20 years from now, right? But it's going to happen. And with firearms, it just happens immediately. So the responsibility of doing this part right, your part right, to make the projectile go where you want it to go, pretty direct relationship. If it's not where you're going to go and the equipment's been checked, it's the operator who's the fault. The operator has to do their part for the equipment to do its part. Would you add something to that, Scott?
Yeah, I think what you're saying about the consequences of your actions, I've been watching. And fortunately or unfortunately, I watch the news from multiple sources, both for work, and I'm the guy who informs my family like Carola does. They're out doing other things. So I collect it all and distill it down. And one of the things that people have been crying about in Ontario, I've heard a lot of this in Ontario, but it's true all the way across the board, is that they're pinpointing teenagers and young adults as the people that are really causing the spread of this. I mean, seniors in care homes are one area, but they're also looking at teenagers in that 17 to 19-year-old. And what they're saying is they're basically saying that these youth, these young adults, don't recognize the consequences of their actions. That by having a party with their friends, they're not hurting anybody, but they are. And that's like you're talking about a firearm, is you have to consider the consequences that remain unseen to you. You may not see where that projectile goes or what it does, but once it's out of your sight, doesn't mean you're not responsible for it anymore. And that's something that's fundamental to what we teach. And that applies to almost everything in life. And a good example of that is, obviously, there's a group of people in that age group that don't understand that, maybe they're not hurting anyone in their group, but that, there are consequences to those actions. And even, for those who don't accept that COVID is such a threat, the fact that they may get themselves into trouble with the law, they may get a criminal record, or they may get charges brought against them. I always tell the girls that they're free to do whatever they think is right, as long as they're willing to accept the consequences. And, we look at our rights and we look at our freedoms and we look at those things. And that's ultimately what it comes down to. But we have to consider, we're talking about Japan. They have a custom of wearing masks when they're sick that's been there for, decades. Anyone who travels on public transportation wears gloves, little white disposable gloves. You can buy them in any convenience store, just so when they, get out of the subway, they can take them off. When we first got there, we had pink eye and we had all sorts of things because we weren't wearing masks. We were riding public transport and touching our face. And really quickly, we learned to do those things. And so if you're sick and you don't wear a mask, they consider it very selfish. They don't consider the government's telling you to do it. They don't consider that your rights are being infringed on. They really see it as a social responsibility not to make other people sick. And, I asked about it when we first got there, and they looked at me like I was a little crazy, my students, and they're like, you want to make your mother sick? You want to make your sister sick? Well, of course I don't.
Right.
then
Right.
why don't you wear a mask when you're sick?
Right.
And so culturally, I think we're in a situation where we see a lot of that. But I also think that we've had a bit of a disconnect where we don't consider that. And I think the firearm community is one exception that we're trying to fight for the understanding that we understand the consequences of our behavior. We have sports with firearms all the time, and somebody getting hurt is an absolute rarity. A fatality is something that is, when it happens anywhere in the world, we all hear about it because it's just something that never happens, right? It's always one of those bizarre, out of the blue things that just never happens. It's like getting hit by lightning, only less common.
Yeah,
So
it's definitely the shooting sports are the safest sport anywhere in the world, right? That's the reality of it. So yeah,
absolutely. And we find too community, right? Like our girls when they came back, of course we were new; they didn't know anyone. Fortunately, we went down to one of the free events at the LFGA shooting sports facility down at the range. That's where we met you. That's where we met Rick Blakely and some of the other people that are really formative of our community. And that's became, and it has become for the youth that are in the SAFE program and the shotgun program and the bench rest program and, the pistol program. So many of the programs we run, that's a nice, safe community. That's people that have learned to respect, as you said, the consequences of our actions. We all get vetted by the RCMP. They're not that it's a perfect community, but it is a good community. And certainly here, it's an inclusive community, as you know, and probably
very much so.
A lot of people know. I was pretty much confined to a wheelchair when I came back. I'm not now, but I was then. And we looked all over for sports I could do with the girls, and there just wasn't anything. Even the pools at that time weren't set up to handle someone like myself or the medical situation I was in. So the shooting sports provide those opportunities. And unfortunately now with the spread of COVID, we can't participate in the sports like we have in the past. But as you said, that this will end. This is not a forever thing.
No.
Our culture, human society has been through this many, many, many times, and we always come out the other side.
Now, hopefully, some of our practices will change and go forward, right? Like your experience in Japan, that's what, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, something like that.
Quite a while ago now, you bet.
Yeah, and that was commonplace then. Well, if that would have been commonplace here, COVID wouldn't have got even much of a hold, probably. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah. There's and I don't know. I'm very much an individual, as you know, and I like doing things. I'm proud of my independence and proud of the freedom that we enjoy here. But in Japan, there's a sense that the individual owes society. And by owing society, it's not that you're subservient to society. It's not that society controls you. It's not that you're sheep. It's that you choose to adhere to a common good for society for the benefit of all. And you count on the person beside you also making that choice and that decision and that commitment. And I think sometimes we get really focused on freedom and don't understand that one of the greatest expressions of freedom is to help out other people, that you are free to give your time and energy, your care, your feelings to other people. And so freedom is not all about doing what I want to do, when I want to do it, how I want to do it, where I want to do it. It's about being free to make choices, in my opinion. And I'm not looking, to get us in a flame war about what freedom is. But I've been in cultures where freedom is defined that way.
Right.
And people make what they consider honorable choices to put aside their own individual needs or wants for what's better for society. And I know that there's people in our society that do that, and I know that it's widespread. But I think that we could all remember in this time of crisis, and I always think about it when I read somebody who doesn't wear a mask and they get in a fight in a store. Whether you think it helps or not, do you really want to antagonize somebody who might be scared of getting sick? As you know, I spent 4 months in coma because of a bug I got from one of our students.
Right.
So yeah, it scares us. We wear masks.
Yeah.
You know, if my daughter saw me going without a mask, it would scare them for a real reason.
Sure.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and I think that that's what we need to consider. And I assume when somebody else does something that I don't think is perhaps necessary, I assume that's necessary to them. And if it's not hurting me, then I have the freedom to accept that it's necessary for them.
That makes sense. Sure.
You know,
That's so long as it's not impacting anybody else negatively. In your case, you negatively, do whatever you want to do, kind of a thing, right? So yeah.
exactly. And I think that's again where the firearm community comes in, is that, you know, we suffer a lot of bad press. We suffer a lot of negative propaganda about who we are and what we do that completely misrepresents us as a community. And, you know, we see that happening too in this COVID situation we find ourselves in, is that the media is always looking for the mass media is always looking for the next hot story. You know, what's sensational now? Who can we, you know, turn to now? And I think we all need to just take a look at what's best for the people we care about, and what can we do to protect those people and help them get through this. And, you know, as you've identified and the show has identified, is that there's people in our community that may have the freedom but not the means to take care of themselves right now.
Right.
And if we do, then we're obligated to help them with that as a freedom of choice.
Right.
And I think is the ultimate power of freedom is to make the choice. I won't go as far as to sacrifice for others, even though that's part of my own belief. And that has to be controlled. I know you can go too far, but I think that, you know, as you do, you're out there, and Corolla, you know, supports you and puts up with it, and you with her horses, and you guys are a great couple. But you guys give so much to the community, and it's a choice you make, right? In other systems, you wouldn't have that freedom to make that choice.
True. Yeah, very true. You know, I heard there's two tidbits I want to share with you just from this week.
Excellent.
Dr. Peter Kellett is a U of L prof that I met earlier, I guess last week. And one of the things he said that really caught my attention is that, oh shit, what's it called now again? Your privilege. Yeah. Privilege is invisible to those who have it. And I thought about it, and I think that makes really good sense, right? If you don't realize it, like as it comes to privilege, I'm like top of the heap, right? But I don't recognize what that means in relation to other people's experience, right? You know, to them being dismissed or them being, you know, chosen against because of gender, how they look, their color, their sexual orientation, you know, whatever those things are. I'm always or almost always treated very, you know, nicely and respectfully and that kind of thing, except for my friends who want to abuse me a little bit, of course, but that's fair. That's should happen. Right. So but you don't see it, what other people's lack in terms of that, how they are treated from other people. Right. So privilege is invisible. The other thing was Eckhart Tolle. He was talking about news and about watching the news. And he said, if you had somebody that, would you let this person into your living room who comes in and says, oh, it's so bad. Somebody died over here. And then there's people that died over there. And these people over here are sick. And, you know, would you let this person in your house? No, you'd lock the door. You'd say, I don't want to hear from this guy, right? Or gal. So anyways, it was quite funny because he's not, you know, I don't think he's ever going to be a stand-up, but he's quite humorous sometimes, right? He's got a very dry humor, and then he has this little chuckle that makes you laugh. Yeah, he's interesting fellow. Very nice man, beautiful man.
I think that's a good point about letting things into your home, and it's also a good point for discussion. You know, what do you bring into discussion? And you know, I know in our houses we have discussions, and of course, as we talked about, the girls are 19 now, so they're adults, but when they were younger and you're talking about things, we were always, you know, trying to encourage them to be part of the conversation, to understand what we did and the choices we made, and that their choices may be different. And that was okay. But, you know, that we worked through those choices. And as adults, we were willing to take the consequences of those choices that we made. And if you look at the news, or you look at politics or other things that are going on, there's so much blaming going on. and very seldom do you have people stand up and say, I played a part in this.
True.
And that goes back to what you were saying about taking responsibility. I can't apologize for slavery. I've never owned a slave. I've never supported slavery, but I can understand the pain that part of our history causes people today.
Sure.
And that was your point.
Yep.
And I think that's what we need to focus on is,
you and I didn't show up at anybody's teepee and take their kids away and try and beat the culture out of them, but we can certainly understand the damage that has done, right? I mean, that was when the first person told me about residential schools and what we as Canadians did. I said, no, that you don't understand. That can't be true. And then later I just, and it went on for like 100 years, right? That's just incredible.
Well, and there as a historian by education, one of the things that we have to look at, but not condone, and that's an argument that I find myself having to repeat often, is I can understand in the cultural context of the time why somebody at the turn of the century who genuinely believed that anyone who didn't follow this particular set of rules and behaviors and ethos was going to go to hell, which was the worst thing they could imagine happening to anyone, and absolutely, people that molested children and did these horrible things. I'm not making excuses for them, but you can understand historically some of the views that were held then shouldn't be held today because we have different information. And not necessarily about religion or belief. Many of those things are personal, but in terms of the freedom of others and the rights of others to choose and make mistakes or do what's best for them without making that decision for them. So as our context changes, yes, it's important to know the past, but we shouldn't be held by the past.
No, very true. Yeah.
That old saying about do you hold nostalgia or are you held by nostalgia?
Right.
That's not the terminology I'd like to use with resident schools, but it applies to so many different things. Right.
And the blame doesn't matter. The solutions matter. Like, what do you move forward? Right. This happened. It was a thing. It was a real thing and it was bad, like no question. But now you still have to move forward. Right. And I think you'll agree with me. A lot of not a lot, all of the times when humans treat other humans bad or abuse them or rape them or beat them or kill them, it's because they see them as less than somehow, right? Less than them because of their color, less than them because of their gender, less than them because of their sexual preference, less than them because of they believe this God and my God is the right God, and this God, I can kill this guy because he believes in the wrong God, right? Or that kind of a thing. And it's just so bizarre, those small differences in human beings, that we make these huge distinctions that then, we can't have a connection, a relationship, accept, like, as you were saying, somebody else who does things different, maybe you don't agree, but if it doesn't harm you, it doesn't harm anybody else, and it's their belief, let them have it, right? That's totally fine. It doesn't harm. But when it's somebody's regarded as less, and that's allows that person to abuse another person because they see him as less, and that's what do they do in wars, right? The enemy is always, they're the godless, terrible, they're gonna rape your children
and demonize.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's bizarre that human beings, where we are, I think, generally made to be cooperative, caring, supportive, nurturing type people. I think that's what we are. But when we operate from fear, and then we regard somebody as less and we're in a fear state, then that seems to lead to violence and all kinds of bad things happening then.
Well, this is a personal story, and I might get in trouble when I don't always choose politically correct words, but the feeling there. I went to a conference. I was involved in cultural management, and I went to a conference out in Vancouver, and there's people from all over the world there. And I met a fellow from New Zealand, and there's a whole bunch of people who didn't know each other, and so we had worked on one of the projects together. And I said, "Oh, let's grab supper tonight. Do you have any plans?" And he's like, "Well, I had thought I would do something, but no, that sounds good. Let's grab supper." So we grabbed supper and had a nice time, and next day came around, and we had lunch together, and we were great things, and went out for supper that night. And partway through the night, we were talking about all the things we learned that day, and all the things, differences in our culture, and Maoris, and things that he was working with. and suddenly he said, "You do understand that I'm gay?" And I said, "Oh, I hadn't really thought about it." He knew that I was married. I bought gifts for my wife, and I said, "I hadn't really thought about it." I said, "What did I make you feel like you had to tell me that? Like, what did I do that made you feel like you had to share that with me? That I,
Yeah."
And he said, "No, you didn't do anything." He said, "It's just, I'm scared that if I don't tell people that I like, that when they find out, they're going to think that I was dishonest with them."
I see. Sure. Okay. Got it.
And then the conversation went on from there, and we talked about, the weight of carrying the fact that he felt that anyone he got close to, he had to discuss his sexuality with. And how, you're talking about privilege. I didn't even realize that as a heterosexual, that I had the privilege of not having to have that discussion.
Right.
You and I have never talked about our sexuality.
No.
We've had to, and not that we couldn't, but but
you go first, Scott.
Yeah, this friend of mine, he's a great guy, and I felt, as you said, I can understand his pain and carrying around that he felt that in our discussion he had to say, not that there's anything wrong with it, and of course,
no,
it doesn't matter to me, but it was very painful for him. And I have no experience what it's like to be gay or what growing up with that was like. But I could see the pain in his eyes when he told me this. And, he felt that he had to interrupt our naturally growing friendship to sort of warn me of this or alert me to it or whatever alarm bell he felt that he had to fulfill.
Right.
And I think we can be sensitive that other people have stuff. And I think that's what we're talking about, that we don't understand. It's like when I see somebody with a mask or somebody without a mask, I don't really know what they're going through. And I don't really know what they've gone through.
Right.
So rather than judge them,
yeah,
I should be looking at, is there ways that I can help them, or is the best help to let them be them? And I think that's a bigger question for our society today is how do we live without impinging our beliefs and our sense of right and wrong on others when they're not doing anything that really hurts us or other people.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that COVID has brought all that out in our society.
I agree.
Now we have people that are sitting around judging each other. We have the government judging what's safe and what's unsafe. We have, and not just in big issues. And that comes back to the firearm issue. The firearms in our safe are perfectly safe. They have never harmed anyone and never will.
Right.
And firearm owners are statistically the safest Canadians you're going to meet.
Yep.
The RCMP run you and I through the system every day to make sure we haven't committed a crime and that we haven't done anything wrong. Yep. And but you look at how we're judged, and sometimes the things that are put out there by anti-gun groups are so offensive to me. I almost feel ashamed, for that brief second that I'm a firearms owner.
Yep.
When they're talking about child killers and, all of these things, that it's just, a death in the waiting. And, the one and only time I've experienced the death of a child, I never want to go through that ever again.
No, I've never experienced it, but I'm sure I would not. That would be horrendous. No, I get that. Yeah. And it's just so bizarre that you and I, as firearm owners and responsible ones, and that have done all the vetting and comply with the law, we're no threat at all to the Canadian citizens who do not have firearms. No threat whatsoever.
Zero.
But what happens is, of course, the people who are using firearms for criminal purposes as weapons, we use them as equipment, they use them as weapons. But the people that are using those as weapons and for criminal intent, they're difficult. They're difficult to catch. They're difficult to, those are big, people get scared chasing them, right? Because they shoot back and they do all kinds of things that are out of accord with our society. We don't. So we're the easy target. So we're not in any way a threat, but the federal government looks at it to say, there's a problem here. We can't go after these guys. The criminals, they're too tough to reach. But all these legitimate people will tell them, and they're going to do what we tell them to do because they follow the laws. They're good Canadian citizens, right? So we get more and more abuse just because others, the whatever it is, the 0.5% of the of our citizens who are criminals, then because they use that piece of equipment, all of a sudden it's our problem, right? So, yeah, it's very sad. Yeah.
Well, I think that can be expanded out into so many of the things we're facing right now. And I watch on TV and I look at the Black Lives Matter and all of the riots that have been occurring in the States, and the other sides and the groups and the white supremacists and everything that's been tied into that, and that we get bombarded with continually. And as you know, and people that have met me in public, when I came back from Japan, I was incredibly obese. Now, we found out that occurred after I was in coma for 4 months. Over the last year, we found out that that's likely due to damage to my pituitary gland when I was in the coma, and the results of that sickness. And, for a while there, fortunately now I'm, regaining my health and my weight and things. I'm being treated for that and I'm getting back to normal. But I had people come up to me, I was in my wheelchair and I had my young daughters with me, and they were like 12 and 12, twins. And, they would come up to me, and people would say to me, people I didn't know would come up to me in Safeway and say, you fat SOB, why don't you get off your backside and stop eating pizzas and do something for your kids?
Wow.
Well, I home educated my daughters, and, they're one of the things I live for, that to me, and to, force that on my daughters to hear that. And what does that do for anyone?
No kidding. Like, how does, obviously it was intentionally made to hurt you. And also, of course, your daughter's hearing that to hurt them. And so how does that, the person who uttered those words, how does that in any way make life better for them? Like, how does their life get better because they insulted or tried to demean you, right? How? Like, I don't understand that, right? So,
well, and I guess that's one of the things, it happened more than once, and it happened a number of times. And I think that part of the girl's sensitivity is because not only did they go through me almost dying and the whole thing when I was younger, but seeing how people treated somebody that was different, or somebody that was visually different than they were. And when I see the riots and things going on TV, and I see where people from two different sides of an argument end with a hug and say, okay, we might be out here, we might be carrying guns, we might be yelling and screaming at each other, but at the end of the day, we're going to hug it out, we're going to walk away. I've listened to what you said, you've listened to what I said, even if we screamed it at each other. Hopefully some of it got through, and we're all good. I can see that those people have come to the point where they realize that we're all human and we're all people. And as you said, you can always find some reason that you think you're better than someone else in some way. Abraham Lincoln was once asked on the trail, the campaign trail, because of course, Abraham Lincoln was quite a tall man.
Yes.
And he was asked, how long should a man's legs be? Thinking that they would catch Mr. Lincoln in he had quite long legs. And his answer, very stoically, grabbing his lapels, according to the reporters were there, was, a man's legs should be long enough to reach the ground.
Nice. Good one.
And I think that answer is a brilliant one for our times.
Yeah,
right?
good one. Yeah.
And we can look at all the injustice and all the things that have gone on in the past. We can look what's happening now, but it really comes down to, are we making sure our legs touch the ground?
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
on the same vein, I just want to interject one thing, because so the person who made those insulting, negative comments towards you, so there was some way, somehow, that they felt that they were superior to you, or maybe not, maybe it was the other way, and to build themselves up, they had to say those words, right? But I think a lot of that speaks about where they're at, right? Like, and if there was a way that we could all kind of regard ourselves as the best possible version of ourselves today,
amen.
then we don't need to put anybody else down for us to be valued in our own world, right? And I think I shared this with you. I'm in love with this thing. I am and aspire to be my favorite human being.
Excellent.
And so for me, it's a choice. I choose that I am my favorite human being. That's not a judgment. That's not saying I'm better than Scott Sweetman, or I'm better than Jesse Parmer, or that's just saying I am my best version of myself today. I'm happy with that. That's great. And the aspire to be part is the aspirational thing, right? What things could I do to be an even better version? What can I learn? If everybody does the best they can with what they have and what they know, so what can I know different tomorrow that'll make me a better person tomorrow, right? Or that I just love this. I don't even know if it's mine. I'm kind of touting it as mine, but I have no idea.
We'll give it to you.
I have no idea where it really came from, but I'm thinking it was my idea. I Googled it. I couldn't find anybody else who came up with it, so I think that's it. By the way, Jesse is okay. Jesse, let us close down. Scott, don't go nowhere. Jesse from Jess FM, let us close down this broadcast, please. Scott and I are going to keep talking, but you go ahead, and I realize you got another show you got to go to. You go do that. Totally fine. We're fine. If anybody wants to see the rest of this, they'll be able to find it on YouTube, is where they'll find YouTube. Alan Friesen on YouTube is where they'll find the whole version. Okay, Jesse, carry on bravely, my friend. I appreciate you, Jesse Parmar.
Thanks, Jesse.
Yeah. You and me, buddy, are going to keep talking because why not? But One other thing I got to tell you, that there's my little philosophical little thing. But one thing I got to tell you too, you know how George Roth likes CZ pistols, eh?
Yeah, what?
And what's my favorite pistol?
The only thing I don't understand about George.
Yeah, exactly. So George and I, when we do those courses together, we always have a nice little exchange, about a little trash talking about, I like Glock, he likes CZ, that kind of a thing. So after the last time he helped me, I owed him some money. So I sent him an EMT, and on the security question, it's world's best pistol, question mark. So for him to cash that, he had to put Glock in there. So I'm like, hallelujah. I have it in writing that George Roth thinks Glock is the world's best pistol.
Oh, well, it brings up an old joke in mind. And we started out in Appaloosa horses. My dad loved the spotted horses. And so our ranch raised Appaloosas and quarter horses. And there was always the standard reply, and I know it wasn't his, but I liked it a lot, when people would say, well, why on earth would you raise Appaloosas? And he always said, well, I was too poor to own quarter horses and too proud to ride a cow. So that's about the same. So, yeah. And I feel sorry for both of you, because you both know that SIGs are better than Glock. Oh.
Where's the delete button? I'm going to delete those comments out of here. What are you doing?
Yeah. No, but going back to what we were talking about, and I think it's really important that we talk about it. And if no one else listens, that's good. You and I enjoy these talks. Is that, when I was going through that, and when people were treating me that way, my first reaction is to get angry. And I'm 6'1", I'm a big lad. I bounced for a few years to pay for university, and my first reaction was like anger. I was like, really? You're going to do this in front of my kids? I'll show you how quick I can get up out of this chair. And so, and then the second one was, well, should I tell you why I'm in this chair. So I tell you where the fact, no, because you don't really care.
Right.
And I had to eventually come around to the realization that in that situation, it wasn't my job to make that person understand if I could intimidate them physically or make them physically or by force, make them take those words back. It wasn't worth engaging them in the middle of a safe way in a philosophical argument or justification of the condition. The real challenge in that situation was for me to look for the hurt in that person that had caused them to be in so much pain they felt better hurting other people.
Right, by lashing out against you. Yeah.
And really, after it happened a number of times, I was really presented with that dilemma. And do I wear a T-shirt that says, I'm not fat because I sit and eat pizza, I have a medical problem? Or do I just thump on everyone that says something like that to me? Or, what do I want? How do I want them to treat me? Well, I want them to look at me and say, I don't know anything about that fellow. Yeah. I don't know what he's gone through. I don't know what he's endured. Right. I don't know what problems he's faced.
Yep.
Why would I go over there and compound those problems? I don't need to make excuses for him. I don't need to give him anything. But why do I need to make it worse? And, really what I wanted from those people and what I still want from people, and I think what we all want, is just recognize that as I don't know anyone that's gone through life and not been hurt substantially in some way, physically, mentally, most of us usually both, and it affects a lot who we are and the actions we take and the things that we do.
Sure.
And I think that the big challenge for all of us, not necessarily about, hashing over the history of all the wrongs that have been done and all of those things, is to recognize that pain in each other, recognize that we've all gone through things. And, like yourself, you identify yourself at, having all of that privilege stuff and just, not really thinking about it or being aware of it. And, I fit in that same thing relatively, not necessarily the same, but that doesn't mean that you haven't suffered. It doesn't mean that I haven't suffered. It doesn't mean when we look at, politicians or other people or, our antagonists or that guy that's, calling me a fat SOB in the grocery store in front of my kids, I don't know what he's been through. And, when you start thinking that way, I have to imagine, I don't have that urge, and I've dealt with some crazy stuff in my life. I don't have the urge to go up and hurt other people in public or for that matter. And I think somebody who gets to that point, they must have experienced stuff that I can't even imagine. Yeah. Now, it may be stuff that I don't associate with being a hurt, but it obviously affected them in a way that, because I know you personally, and I know that you would never get pleasure out of hurting somebody else, calling them down and making them feel less than you are. Quite the opposite. You get pleasure out of building people up. I do. I think that you do, and you work very hard at it, and we all appreciate that. But when you've experienced those people, do you get the sense, now that you're on a mission to really help people when they're young and help them through those things, do you get the feeling that often hurt drives people to do those things that hurt other people?
It seems there's quite a dichotomy there, right? There's a phrase, hurt people, right? That exist. But then there's the exact opposite, right? That people who have been hurt can make a decision earlier in their lives. That's not going to be me. I am not going to do that to my kids, right? Or I'm not going to drink because, that kind of a thing, right? Because this caused so much damage in that family's situation, right? So I think it goes both ways. And I think a lot of that is a function of the interactions that young person has come in contact with, right? If they saw other people who were caring and trying to help others in their community and make a difference and make the world a better place, they might say, well, no, like maybe I'm not there yet, but I want to do that. Ultimately, that's where I want to get to, right? And of course, people have to take care of themselves first, right? I mean, self-care is huge, and doing the things for you today that can give you the best tomorrow and your best capacity for tomorrow, huge, right? Like, and for some people, that's like, whatever, 15 minutes exercise, right? Or it's what I got to tell you, these COVID times, I'm having some awesome days. My goodness. I'm like, I feel guilty a little bit saying, because I know some people are having really hard times, but man, I have my schedule that I look after my clients that, takes maybe in the past that would have involved 4 hours of driving a day and then 2 hours of looking after clients. Now it's 2 hours of looking after clients on Zoom or phone, and then, well, maybe a little more than 2 hours, depends on the day, then some study, an hour of meditation, an hour of singing, some hot tub time, so cooking supper with the wife, making some meals with the love, my bride Corolla, and sharing those together. It's like, oh, and then at like 9 o'clock or something like that, we go and cuddle up on the couch and watch like a Murdoch mystery or something. Life is awesome. I'm really enjoying this, right? So, I could live the day I'm having today. I could have that same day every day for the rest of my life and be totally happy. Like, every day is so good. Like, do you ever watch the movie Groundhog Day with Bill Murray?
Many times.
One of my favorites, right? Because Bill Murray, arrogant, and he's an asshole to begin with, right? And he gets stuck in that town. And as you know, first of all, he tries all of the things that most of us would do, the risky behaviors. I'm not going to die anyways. I'll play chicken with the train, and I'll crash the car, and I'll step in front of the arm.
I'll drive off the cliff. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So all of those things. But ultimately, what does he do? He starts to say, all right, how can I make this day better and this day better? And then he goes through this whole process where, he knows the kid falls out of the tree at 9:45. He's there to catch the kid. He goes for his piano lesson. So he builds all these components to make this perfect day, right? And at the end, of course, he gets the love of his life. He gets the girl, because now he's this perfect, well, the best version of himself living this perfect day, right? That's fascinating. So I love that show.
One of the things I think that tied in with that is balance, right? And talking to young people, the media we see, and I think most people understand this, but so Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, all of those things feed me what they think I want to see, right?
Yeah. So yep.
If you and I watch the same thing, if we go in our news feed, it's going to be different, because it says, Scott likes blue and Al likes red, so we're gonna highlight red cars in Al's stream, and we're gonna highlight blue trucks in Scott's theme. And the problem with that is our thoughts or our beliefs are continually reinforced,
right,
without being challenged.
Right.
And
we have no diversity of thought to balance that out at all. I'm with you. Carry on.
No, and it just got me thinking about that, is that we don't live now in a situation where we're challenged. We're challenged by an extended community, a family. I come from one of my grandparents is German. There was 5 brothers in my grandfather's family, so he had 4 siblings. They all had big families. When we got together, there was like 200 of us, all cousins. They used to call us the White Hutterites, and all these big German families farming in the same area. It's funny, and they would tell you, like, one of your aunts or one of your cousins would say, "Oh, you should share that with your brother," or there was always a different point of view being presented to you,
right?
But we look at our COVID times now, and I know that we don't have local television. We get our local television off the internet. So all of our information to us comes through the internet. Now, on purpose, we make sure that we get opposing points of view. Right. So we go out of our way to watch people's points of view or media's points of view that are contrary to our own, which sometimes, the algorithms in Facebook get really confused about what I like. So I get really strange ads and things. But if you don't go out of your way now, a lot of people don't go to church, and you can't go to church right now like we used to, big congregations. you don't have, now we can't have social gatherings of a large number. And I don't, it doesn't matter whether you think that's right or wrong, that's the rules. And
Right.
so even before the rules, a lot of people didn't have, the amount of people working on Christmas Day or Thanksgiving was huge. The malls are open, those types of things.
Yeah.
So, if we don't go to church, teachers aren't allowed to talk about morality. They're not allowed to, tell children that that's maybe not acceptable. They're not allowed to do any of those things. So we don't get it in school. We don't get it in church. We don't get it in extended family. We don't get it through the media choices we have. So where do we get that dialectic?
Right.
I'm like you. I'm really big on that dialect.
Yeah.
If I have a thesis, I want to hear people say, "Oh, you're argumentative." Well, I'm not argumentative, but if I have an idea, I want it challenged.
Yeah.
I want to hear other ideas that say, "No, that's wrong. That's nuts. Here's how you should look at it," because that then allows me to say, "Oh, okay, I'll consider all those things, and then what's my new thesis?" And then we'll have another attack at that. And that dialectic development of thought, I think, is a foundation of society, where we have ideas and we say, "Oh, that doesn't work," or "That didn't turn out the way I thought it was going to," or "That backfired," and we correct. Looking at history, some of our best developments have been because of some of our worst atrocities.
Mm-hmm.
And you bring that down to the micro, and you look at households that are isolated now. You look at children that they see 1 or 2 adults a day only. They get fed a steady diet, predetermined, pre-programmed, pre-gentrified media.
Yeah.
And they never get that opportunity to say, "Oh, yeah, maybe that wasn't quite what I thought," and develop a new idea from that.
Right. No, I understand exactly what you're saying. And I can tell you that when I was a younger man, I was in love with my opinions. I thought I was a genius. So that was I don't know, probably about 3 months ago that I changed my mind. but the reality is, a lot of times I've been faulted by thinking that I had the best idea in the world. And then when I talked and expressed it to others, they said, "Well, have you thought of this? How about that?" I said, "Oh yeah, that's way better." So the reality is, the diversity of the opinions makes for a way better solution, right? And the universe, or maybe it's just Google, is trying to tell me that diversity is important. Is what the message I'm getting.
Yeah.
There's a Dr. Zach Bush, who he seems to be super smart and a polymath, knows everything about everything, right? And he's very articulate and he's very passionate, and so
you hate those guys, Al?
What's that?
Don't you hate those guys? They make the rest of us look bad.
Well, they do make the rest of us look bad. Exactly. Like, gee, this guy's a genius. But anyways, what he was getting at, and what Bruce Perry talks about as well, is I think that the one thing, a diet of one thing, a diet of one point of view, a diet of one kind of food, a diet of one kind of anything that is just mono in nature is compromised, or is less than a complete, is kind of the way I see it, right? And when we want good solutions, the more eyes, the more perspectives we have on it, the more rounded the solution will be, the better thought out would be, right? Like in a perfect world, if we had, here's the problem the world has, and the citizens around the world who could see that problem from all the different perspectives would come up with the best solution. The citizens, but what happens often is it gets to money enters this thing, and then it's whoever has the most money to make the most advertising or to manipulate what we think about it wins the day, and then this is the new solution, whether it's the right one or not, right? And one of the things he talks about, and I believe he's true, but I have no desire to do all the fact checking and to go to school to 12 years to try and learn the terminology even. But he talks about, as an example, with in 1975, there was 1 in 5,000 kids who were on the autism spectrum. 1 in 5,000 children, right? Now it's about 1 in 50. So from 1975 to now, 1 in 5,000, 1 in 50. And I'm not saying autism is a terrible thing, but it is a developmental type problem, right? And autistic people, maybe they've got the perspective we need to see problems that we don't understand. Just like that Temple Grandin, you know who she is?
Yep.
Yeah. So she sees the world like cows see it. So she can make these shoots that aren't cow scary, that are cow friendly, right? Because how she sees the world. She has a unique perspective. Anyways, I got a little sidetracked there. His thing is that what does Roundup do? Roundup is an antibacterial. So they made the GMO crops. They use Roundup that kills all the bacteria. But the problem with killing all the bacteria is the bacteria and fungi and parasites are a source of intelligence that that informs us and connects us, right? Like, so this doing one thing one way, then we eliminate all this other diversity, and it is to our peril that we eliminate that diversity, right? So it fascinating type thing to me in terms of how that works. And even on the brain type development type layer, our brain has a brainstem, a diencephalon, a limbic, and then the neocortex, right? So what we find is that for kids who get development trauma, severe trauma in their younger years, they get locked in the brainstem part. Well, the brainstem, all it does is make immediate judgments and takes action, right? There's no thought, there's no thinking things through, there's no consideration of other ideas. It's only, I got this input and this is what I'm going to do, right? So I think that whole thing about more diversity, and in our communities, and more diversity in our communities, more different perspectives on solving challenges in our community, think are very valuable. And one of those things I think that would be very valuable, this is Krolla's idea, by the way, but I think it's brilliant, is I was talking to Travis Plated Hair. He's a Blackfoot man, and he was talking about the 7 stars. And it's basically kind of a training program, if you will, to help young members of the tribe become good functioning adults, kind of a thing, right? That was their deal. And so with that, there was a diversity of people that supported those kids, right? There was uncles and aunts and grandpas and, all these different kids these kids were supported that way. So they had a whole diversity of supports in place. When those rich relationships were kind of more reduced to less relationships, or more maybe a relationship with your device than another human being, well, then that's a challenge. That's not how humans are made to live, right? So again, that's kind of where it's a mono thing instead of a diversity sort of a thing. That's the way it seems to me, in terms of the universe is telling me that diversity is a good thing.
I think that some of that comes from, and I've gone back and I've been reading a bunch of older publications to see, because we grow and change, right? That's what you're talking about. I
Sure.
see things differently now than I did 20 years ago. And so I've been reading Charles Darwin. And I think one of the greatest crimes that have been committed against Charles Darwin is the whole propagation is that he believed in the survival of the fittest. And we've interpreted that to mean the strongest, those that can overcome, those that can beat down their competition. And that's not what he said.
Nope.
What he said was survival of the most adaptable.
Yes.
That's what he considered to be the fittest.
Right.
Those organisms, you look at a nature show and they like showing highly specialized. I was watching one that I enjoy called Tiny, and it's about little organisms and animals in different ecosystems. And there was one about a bee that goes in and gets the it's not nectar, but it's a sweet pollen-y fluid out of an orchid. And when they go in there to get it, the orchid attaches a pollen pod to their back, because the only way they can get out is the orchid's developed an escape hatch. Most insects die in there, but this particular bee can crawl out an escape hatch the orchid has built into its flower. And when we were in Japan, we actually saw these flowers in the botanical gardens, which are beautiful if you get to Nagoya, Japan. But they have huge botanical gardens and different climates. And the one they had of a tropical zone showed these flowers and how specialized they were, that this one type of bee was their pollinator. All other insects got killed.
Got it.
In this flower.
Right.
But this one type of bee could get out through this escape hatch. And so in nature, you see these highly specialized organisms, and that works really well until a catastrophic event happens.
Right.
As long as everything's cooking along okay, and I see a lot of parallels in modern human society. Everything was doing, no, of course it wasn't doing okay. I'll get flamed for saying that. But, the pandemic, this catastrophic sort of event that's occurred, if socially, if not in anything else, has broken that highly specialized idea of, the more you specialize, the more you focus on one thing, the better chances of your survival of the fittest. And I think it's trying to remind us, as you said, that it's the survival of the most adaptable. And so we're seeing a great challenge here to our societies, our political systems, our economic systems, our social systems, our family systems, all of these things that have become quite specialized. I look at the family, and in other parts of the country or other countries that I've been to, 3 or 4 generations live in one apartment. Now
Right.
that in Japan, it may be a very expensive apartment, $1.8 million for an apartment, and 3 generations live there. To go to another country, some of the slums, and it might be a tin roof shack that, 4 generations and 2 neighbors and a cow live in. But so specialized, so focused on, one type of thing. But now we're, like you said, we're being challenged to adapt and to find ways to deal with new challenges that were unexpected or unthought of a few years ago.
Yep.
Despite the fact that people have been warning us that pandemics occur on a rather regular sort of cycle, right?
Right.
I'm always a little bit confused when people say, oh, this came from nowhere. Well, no, it didn't. We've had these throughout our history, and we'll continue to have them. So when I look back at, the teachings or the discoveries of Charles Darwin, and we've sort of propagated this idea of survival of the fittest, we've done ourselves a disservice. We teach that to our children, and that whole mentality, especially in North America, of the sort of, we call it the John Wayne mentality of the lone cowboy going out and settling the West. And, I grew up on a ranch, and that sort of romantic image, and, that's true. But the fact is those people were adaptable. You look at the people that, mapped out Canada, the western part of Canada, and it wasn't that they were high. Yes, they were, surveyors, if you look at them, but they had the ability to adapt to new people and new cultures and new situations. And when they couldn't adapt, they either died or they suffered the consequences of not being able to adapt. And I think that's the real solution to what we're going through now, is that the people that can adapt, as a small business owner, I was looking at some stats, and Amazon's sales have gone up over 100% because of COVID. Mm-hmm. Where small businesses are down 30% across the board. Is it better that we say, oh, this has destroyed us? Or is it an opportunity to invent new ways to do our business? Is an opportunity to diversify? Is it an opportunity to look at, ways to adapt, to take Charles Darwin at his word and say that we're going to survive this because we're adaptable?
Can I share a story with you?
Loved you.
I've been chatting. As you know, I work with employers who value their employees and invest in benefit programs to contribute to the health of their employees and their dependents, right?
Which is counterintuitive to things like the entrepreneur myth, right? Where employees, you pay them the least, you will get somebody that can just barely do the job, and you replace them if you need to, right?
Right. That's not, those are not the clients I want to work with, right? I want to work with people that are valuing their employees because they know that the employees, in serving their customers well, are looking after them as well, right? So anyways, I've been checking in with my clients, just calling them up and saying, hey, pretty unusual times. How you doing? Like, how's the business going? And how are you doing personally, right? And there's a good third that are having better years than they've had for a long time. right? Some best years ever, which that's impressive, right? Now,
Yeah,
there's about a third that, yeah, their budget dollars are dried up. Fundraising is, they're in a tough way, right?
absolutely.
And then there's about another third that are kind of status quo, like they've made some adjustments and they're doing okay. And they're maybe not thriving, but they're surviving. But about a third are thriving, about a third are surviving, and about a third are dealing with a decline, right? And they're in it. And it's just so interesting in terms of that. This is the reality that we all face, and a lot of it has to do with the resources that you had at the point that it kicked in, if you will, right? If you were in a good place in terms of your income and your health and your ability to work from home, if you could do those things, these times are pretty easy, right? But if your job, your work requires you to go in a very populated area to serve your clients with a hand to hand kind of a thing, and your health is maybe a little iffy and your revenue is a little bit on the light side to begin, these are tough times, right? These are really challenging. And worse than that, if you're a let's say a woman and who's with a man who abuses her, and now neither of them are working anymore, wow, that's a terrible situation, right? Kind of trapped in an environment with an abuser and really very, very little options to be away from that environment, right? So some folks are having really tough times, and it just sort of, the occurrence happened and here's the impacts that it have. Even think about in terms of who gets COVID and the symptoms or the impact on their health, right? Sometimes people that are in direct contact with people that COVID don't catch it. Well, how the hell does that make any sense, right? And then the second thing, the people that do catch it, it's like, oh yeah, I had a sore throat for a couple days, or I had a headache, or I lost my sense of smell for 2 days, and then I'm good. I'm back again. From that to death, how do those extremes make sense, right? One thing I got to tell you though too, when you're saying about this not being a surprise, that Zach Bush again, a year before I guess apparently I got myself a little man crush on Zach Bush. A year before, he said, here's where there's going to be an outbreak. Here's where I think. And why he said that is because of huge concentration of Roundup use in Wuhan territory there. Or what is it, a province or territory? Province. A huge Roundup use, which then destroys a lot of the biodiversity, right? That's one problem. Two, huge pollution, and the pollution seems to have a implication with COVID and how strong it takes hold, that kind of a thing. So those are the two things that he predicted that's where the next virus would come from, was that from that province. So yeah.
Well, yeah, it's the signs are all there, and I think that goes back to what you're talking about, is being diversified and getting your information from lots of different sources. I think that humans have survived because we are adaptable, and not as individuals, but as a group. There's always some in that group, and it goes back to your clients too, right? There's some in that group that maybe they're in a better position, or maybe they just found the right way to adapt to the situation that they're in. And I think that's one of the challenges of being an entrepreneur, is being adaptable and seeing those changes before they're forced on you. And my grandfather, I was talking about them. He's a smart man. Their parents were immigrants. My great grandparents came from Germany and England, and they had 5 sons, like I said, and all of those sons financially became very, very successful. And part of that was that they had a belief that you never invested money you couldn't afford to lose. You didn't ever use credit if cash would work better. And to them, it always worked better, because you couldn't guarantee the future. They had gone through the war, they'd gone through the dirty 30s, and they'd just seen that it doesn't matter how well you plan, everything could go crazy, boots up, like we're experiencing now, the day after tomorrow without any warning. And so they prepared for that throughout their process. So when they invested money, they invested cash. If they lost it, they didn't lose their business. They didn't lose their homes. Now, obviously, I'm stupid. I didn't learn those things, and I'm not going to die a millionaire. But the philosophy I did learn, and that's that you can't be prepared for everything. The best way to prepare is to know how to adapt and be flexible enough that you're in a position to always say, okay, this has worked in the past. This has been my way. It's worked. It's been great. But now is a different time. It's a different vision that I need. And instead of letting someone else take that position, I'm going to do my best to adapt and keep my position in whatever business we're in or whatever economy we're in. I just wanted to touch on something else that you said on a personal basis. Is my father was abusive to my mother, and about being home. And so he showed cattle. As I said, we were in a dairy, and so he was gone a lot of the time. And of course, now that we're older, we can talk about it. I can talk to her about it, or she's talked to me about it. But when we were young, we always thought it was bad that Dad was gone all the time. But for her, all the hard work she had to do on the farm, getting up to milk the cattle at 4:30 every morning, and all these things, that was way, way better for her than when he was home.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah.
And, as people grow older, and my dad and mom made up, they loved each other when they got married, and they were 18 years old, and they became better people in their own words. And like you said, they became better versions of themselves.
Right.
And when my dad passed away from cancer a number of years ago, he was definitely a person I could respect and loved, for what he was then, not
right.
where he had come from. Right.
Right. Right. Hey, look at the growth that he had, right? From
exactly.
whatever triggered him to be like he was, ultimately he was able to find a way to be more supportive, more loving, more empathetic, more a better human being, kind of a thing, right? Is ultimately.
That's such a great point, because I didn't know until I was older. So I was about my 20s. My grandmother told me, and I didn't know, when he was 16 and he was driving downtown in Bentley, our little town, an elderly lady had escaped, ran away from the senior care home. She had dementia, and she stepped out from behind a bread truck, and he hit her, and she died.
Oh, wow. I
didn't know that. So when I grew up, I just thought, he's an asshole, pardon my language, but, he hurt my mom and never ever hurt us. But, I saw him hurting my mom, and that was very traumatic for me.
Sure.
And then, when my grandmother told me this, and she said, we took him to psychiatrists, and his emotions basically froze. Like his brain has blocked that out. He doesn't, yes, at some level, but consciously, he doesn't remember the accident. His brain has locked that part of his mind off, because he was a sensitive guy. He was creative. He was brilliant, had a really high IQ. But suddenly I had to look at him differently.
Yeah.
Suddenly I knew another part of his story that I didn't know before. And I was judging him. You love your parents, I think, no matter what. But, I always judged him for what I saw him do to my mom. And then I learned, and it didn't excuse what he had done. It didn't, take it away. But it gave me a different perspective that, he was suffering from something that even he didn't understand.
Right.
Yeah. And even when he passed away, he still had mental issues with that he didn't understand. I mean, later in life, he went to see a psychiatrist, and he got help. And I think that did help him. But as an adult, that's helped me understand, when I see somebody or when I see something happen, I have no idea what's gone on for that person or in their lives.
Definitely.
And to judge them would be a complete waste of my time and their time.
Yeah.
And I think that part of that adaptability is to putting your energy where it'll do the most good. And, your advice and what you do, and my advice to clients is the same, is that any energy that you're exerting, that you're spending, that doesn't take you towards your goal is energy, time, or money that you're wasting. So you really need to define that goal, and you need to make sure that everything is moving you towards that goal, whether it's being the best person you can be, whether it's, having a better quarter so that you can support your employees, whatever, being a better parent, whatever that is, then that needs to be your commitment, and you need to adapt your behavior, your resources, everything you have to achieve those goals as you've defined them.
Yeah, makes sense. You know, we've been chatting for quite a while here, Scott. But we should probably wrap this up. But one thing I did want to say is, if you talk to people like Eckhart Tolle as an example, or that Dr. Zach Bush, they're talking about that this is a turning point. We have a choice to make here, right? And Eckhart Tolle does it this way: that a catastrophe, is that what we call this? This kind of an event is an awakening, so that we decide, hey, we're going to be better humans. We're going to try and look out for each other better. You know, if I have enough, well, then I got to be willing to share more here, because our health is all related, right? We're all in the same thing together, right? So if we got a whole bunch of people who don't get enough food, they don't get enough sleep, they don't have a home, and they're ill because of that, and their being ill makes me ill, well, obviously that's a problem for all of us, right? So they need to have the supports for people like me, let's say, where I'm in a very good place. I feel a kind of an obligation that I need to help people that aren't there, because if I help them get there, get to be a state of enough, life will be better for them. Life will be better for me. Life will be better for all of us, right? I mean, just think about if we could have a society where there was no child abuse, child sexual abuse, child abandonment, none right now. In 5 years and 10 years and 15 years and 20 years, each of those cycles, we'd have more and more productive people who can live happy lives, who can have great relationships, who want to make a difference in their world, right? Because people do the best they can with what they have and what they know, right? So if we could do that, we could make our world, our community, our world a way better place, not to mention just making lives better for little people now, right? It's a huge investment that pays big dividends in monetary costs, but in human costs, right? Huge advantage, huge dividends there, right? So
I think your earlier advice holds true too, that you have to take care of yourself. Like, that's the first step.
Definitely.
I mean, not to the point where you have to be perfect, because we'll never get there.
No.
But, you know, once you're stable enough in yourself to reach out to other people, and, you know, yes, there's limitations on how we can do that. And there's restrictions and all sorts of impediments, but that's just part of the challenge.
Yes.
We're in a time of challenge. And most people that I know are at their best when they're being challenged. You know, that's why we love the shooting sport so much. Is you take a youth and you give them a tool that they have to be respectful of, and they have to know where it is pointing every second, and they have all these things to concentrate on. And then you put a timer on that, and then you put an obstacle course, you know, basically a gymnasium in front of them, and you tell them you're going to watch that they break any little infraction, and you're going to cut them. They're done for the day. There is no replay. There is no start over. And it's like watching, you know, the Russian ballet do the Nutcracker. Or Swan Lake. It's just beautiful how young minds can take these challenges, and instead of being crushed by them, they are invigorated and they're empowered, and they take those challenges as energy, and they just eat them like candy or caffeine. When we're an adult, they get more excited, more ramped up, more good to go. And
you know what I was thinking about the other day? Sorry to interject, but remember Devlin when he was just so little, and he had to have both his hands on this, like he had to kind of, I think he had both fingers on the trigger kind of thing, because he didn't have the strength in one of them. And those little tiny hands, and that's all he could do is get it on there. And he shot the thing. He was like, I could not believe. I'm looking at the size of him and looking at how he's gripping it, and he did really well. Like, have you
seen him lately though? He's probably taller than you are now.
Oh, I know. But when he started, he was like, I don't know what, 4 foot nothing and a tiny little guy. And now he's this. But anyways, it was just amazing. As you said, he had a challenge, said, this is how the rules, you have to do this safe. If you can't do it safe, you can't do it. and he rose to the challenge and did extremely well. So it makes your heart glad when you see that. So
one of the mottos of SAFE, and that you know very well, and I think that if there's one message after this long rambling, if we had to cut it down, the message would be the one that we tell the kids. If you don't win, you learn. And, when we go to those competitions, there's one winner. But that doesn't mean there's only one person that took something away.
Right. Everybody should take something away, right? So,
but you decide that yourself.
Yes.
Like, you decide if you're going to value that experience and you're going to learn from it, or if you're just going to be frustrated and angry because you didn't win.
Yep.
And so I think that a good word to our politicians and our leaders and all the other people influencing people is to get the message out that you might not be winning, but you're learning. And as long as you're learning and you're open to learning and growing and being a better version of yourself, as you say, that we will get through this. And if we come out on the other side with those things as part of our modus operandi, our life energy and our goal, we'll be better as a society, not just as an individual or individual.
Agreed. Mavis would say it like this. Mavis would say, we get by with help from our friends. We get by through thick and through thin. We'll get by. Anyway.
That's a good way to end it, buddy. Well done.
All right.
Segue out, my friend.
Okay.
Have a safe and happy night.
You too, man. And it was a pleasure chatting with you.
As always, take care.
Okay, see ya.